It is almost Thanksgiving, a time to take stock, to express gratitude, and almost as iconically, it's a time to eat. But for so many Floridians, hunger, it is a year-round issue, and more than 2 million people in our state struggling right now to afford consistent and nutritious food. And that in a state, where agriculture is such a massive industry. So joining us today to talk about hunger and what can be done to help support those in need, we have Florida's Agriculture Commissioner, Wilton Simpson. Commissioner, thank you so much for joining us here on
Thank you for having me.
It's so beautiful to have you here. And I know that for decades, you have owned and managed your own agricultural operation, egg farm. How cool is that? Tell me about that experience and what you have taken from that in order to fulfill your very important role that you have right now.
Well, most farmers, I would say almost all farmers, take a great sense of pride in the fact that we produce food and fiber for our population, whether that population is just the state of Florida or the rest of the world, because unfortunately, the United States of America is a net importer of food today. In the state of Florida, though, agriculture is the second leading driver of the economy. Nearly 2 million people today went to work in agriculture. And as a farmer, you take, like I said, just a sense of pride when you see, in my case, your eggs in grocery stores feeding families. But you could look at, any of our farmers here in the state of Florida, like right now, nearly 80% of all the fresh vegetables sold on the eastern seaboard of the United States are coming out of Florida. And so those Florida farmers have a very large sense of pride. They have it's one of those things that, farmers don't really, we show our pride through our products. You don't ever really see a lot of boastful farmers or people like that, but they're clearly interested in continuing to feed the world in Florida. And it's our job at the Department of Agriculture to make sure they have all the tools they would need to be able to do that job with. And obviously, government has a role here, but our biggest role is to get out of the way and allow farmers to do their things. We do a lot of research, we do a lot of planning, we do best management practices for our farmers. So there's a big role there. But as growing up on a farm, every day we knew that when I was stacking those eggs, and I've done that since I was 11, 12 years old, stacking those eggs at that farm or fixing the equipment, or if I was at school and a piece of equipment broke down, they may have to come get me. I'd come home and fix the equipment and then go back. My dad worked out of town a lot when I was in, especially, upper junior high. We had junior high back then.
Sure.
Junior high and high school level grades. So we took a lot of pride in knowing that, our product was going and feeding families.
And we don't want the farmers and the ranchers to feel the pinch. And I say that because we talk about food prices, and that can be such a balancing act. We want the prices to be low enough where people can shop and get their stuff, but we want it to be high enough so that farmers and ranchers don't feel that blow. How do we do that? How do we balance that?
That is an amazing balance. People go and they will say, how can it be possible that beef or milk or eggs are at a certain price in the grocery store? The same inflation that we had had for the previous 4 years affected all of our farmers. That same labor cost, that same input cost, feed, all of the packaging costs, all of the things it takes us to get to that product.
Yeah.
So when you see that price is 20, 30, 40, 50% higher, the vast majority of that was input costs, things that we not only do not have any control over, things that we don't even make money on. And so in Florida, we have another unique challenge, and it's because our real estate is so valuable. 350,000 people a year move to the state of Florida. Where are they going to live? And so that comes into sprawl. And so when you think about farmers, clearly we have farmers that are in the state that are many generations. Today, again, as I said earlier, it's the second leading driver of the economy, over $200 billion a year of economic output in our farming community. So it's a major component of not only our economy, but our well-being of our state. And so when you think about how do we lower costs for farmers, how do we do things? We do regulatory things to get out of the way. We pass things like the Right to Farm bill that keeps farmers from being sued for nuisance lawsuits. We try to educate the public that farmers are the first environmentalists, that we are here to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. Because what a lot of people don't see is the regulatory structure, in addition to land costs and these inflationary pricing costs that farmers have to pay, that regulatory structure pushes us further and further out of business. Labor being one of those these days, right? We use a lot of H-2A labor, which is a federal program, and we rely on that for farm labor to be able to come into Florida and harvest these crops and put these crops away to feed these families. So when you think about the regulatory structure, most of the things that hinder Florida farmers, just like probably any other state, comes from the federal level. Fortunately, we have an administration now, the Trump administration's very pro-farmer, and they're working very closely with our farmers to make those things better. But it's still not, when I say better, it needs to be so simple that a small farmer, a farmer with 40, 50, 100 acres, can be able to go through those regulatory hurdles without it putting them out of business.
And we're going to get in the next block, I want to get more into that collaboration from federal, state to local. But before we do that, I do want to talk about, Commissioner, the Farmers Feeding Florida initiative. So cool. So when you, as farmers, have excess stuff, content, goods, you're able to distribute that to folks who need it through the food banks. How is that going? I mean, that just sounds like it makes sense.
The program is actually doing very well.
Is it?
We're very, very proud of this
What data
program.
do we have on the usage?
Well, I have some numbers. I hope I get them close to being accurate here. But, that program started in July the 1st as the new budget come into effect. And Senate President Albritton, this was one of his major priorities also. And so we collaborated on a process to where how do we get food insecure people more food to them through their distribution system that is close to them. So we called this program the Feeding Florida program, and there is a food bank network through Feeding Florida with all the distribution in place. And we said, okay, well look, how much money do we need to take down those commodities and get them to those families? This year we were given $38 million, not only to enhance some of those facilities where people would go, but also to buy that product. And I'm going to give you the first product that we came across that was such a glaring issue for Florida farmers were our dairy farmers. During the summertime, kids are out of school. So when you calculate that over the year, about 4 months out of the year, children are out of school. Right. Where does all that dairy product go instead of going into a carton to go to a classroom? Well, they were having to haul this product as far away as Wisconsin to go into a cheese product, so they were getting paid a lot less money for their product, and also that product, and then they were having to pay for all the hauling and all those trucks on the road and all the challenges with those things. What we did is we said, wait a second, what if we step in the summertime and other holidays and we buy that milk at cost, not making a profit here for that farmer, but at least buy it at cost at the farm and then distribute it through Feeding Florida. We have done that. We have served over 5.5 million customers through that program since July.
Incredible.
We've also done it with peanuts. We've done it clearly with vegetables. And we believe that by July 1st of next year, we will have spent our $38 million not only enhancing, I think 10 million of it was to enhance the distribution centers of that product, and the other 28 million was a direct buy directly from our farmers, which included those farmers and obviously beef also. So it has to be produced in Florida, it has to be Florida made. And again, a lot of times this product would go to waste. A lot of times this milk may get dumped. Certainly it could get hauled to Wisconsin at a much cheaper price. Nonetheless, it's putting our farmers out of business. That disadvantage in that timeline is putting them at a major disadvantage to their peers in other states and across the country. So this was a place where not only could we help those farmers, but the main and the key goal was to help those food insecure families. And so by marrying those two together, this program so far has worked out very well, and we're very, very proud of the people that are getting that service and food.
That's so cool, because you hear of some local bakeries who their day-old bread, right? They instead of throwing them out, they can distribute that.
Go to the food banks.
Yeah.
And we, as a Department of Agriculture, we have worked with our large supermarkets in this state to get more of that meat products and things like that, where they would make fresh sandwiches and things. How do we get that and get it to our food banks for distribution rather than going to be thrown away? So we've worked very hard the last 2.5 years, almost 3, to get more and more food into our food banks for distribution. And so this program that we did through the legislature last year with the Feeding Florida program that we did, not only are we very proud of it, it's being very effective, and it's being very effective for both groups, the food insecure and our farming community. So we're very proud of it.
So Commissioner, I'm curious to know, any other initiatives or conversations? We all think, we all ask, what more can we do? What's the latest with that? What's brewing behind the scenes?
Well, another big component of being able to feed Florida families and families across the country is our wildlife corridor. I was Senate President during COVID, during 2022, and we made it a major priority to say that we're going to put in statute the wildlife corridor so we can protect it. It represents about 18 million acres. And what I describe that as, there's a very beautiful picture. If you Google the wildlife corridor, there's a picture there. Or you can just Google a map of the state of Florida at nighttime, and you'll see all the beautiful lights of this state. Everywhere it's dark on that map, it's a wildlife corridor. It's where animals traverse the state, it's where the aquifer is recharged, and it's where we grow your food. We cannot do without that. And so we have a major program at the Department of Agriculture called Rural and Family Lands Program, where we buy the development rights from farmers mostly within that space. They don't have to be in the defined wildlife corridor, but well over 90% of all the purchases that we make of development rights, a conservation easement, if you will, are within that wildlife corridor. So something at the Department of Agriculture where we see to be able to keep farmland affordable, farmland in farming, and slow down the growth in these areas, in these small rural areas. That's what the Department of Agriculture's it's been a major priority of mine dating back to the Senate. And then we have received nearly $700 million in the last 3 years from the legislature. So we want to thank the legislature and the governor for providing those resources. And we have went from 56,000 acres protected in 2022 when I took office to well over 200,000 acres today, protected from future development.
Wow, that's substantial. Commissioner, one constant concern for many Americans over the last, chunk of years, of course, we have inflation and then just the cost of crucial goods. How would you rate kind of the market, the climate here in Florida compared to what else is happening in the rest of the country in terms of what makes us unique, maybe our unique battle or our unique successes?
Florida's had so many successes in the last decade. When you think about Florida versus the other states, we have the #1 education system in the country 8 years in a row by World News Report. Our universities and colleges we have universal school choice in this state. We're the lowest tax state per capita in the union, the lowest debt per capita state in the union. Florida has a very unique balance sheet. But what that has created is the idea that maybe during COVID we had 500,000 people or 600,000 or 700,000 people a year moving here. So it's created some challenges for us on the cost of real estate going up in agriculture. Obviously, the additional crowding and the additional road congestion, school congestion, how do you catch up with that much growth? So the challenges that we have had was because of the successes. And if you'll remember during COVID, we were called the Free State of Florida because we were open for business. We insisted on kids going back to school. We insisted on families being able to go run their businesses and doing things. So it made Florida really the shining city on the hill, if you will, for the United States. Everyone wants to come to Florida, and they were. And I joke about this sometimes. One of the places that I failed as Senate President was, I wanted to make all the roads coming into Florida 1-lane roads, and all the roads leaving Florida 8-lane superhighways. We didn't get that done, but nonetheless, Florida has had many, many successes, including in many successes in our agriculture to be able to protect and provide for agriculture. But going forward, we're gonna get back in. We're gonna have the same problems: affordability of housing, affordability of insurance. The legislature's taken some major steps in the last 5 years to help reduce those costs, and they're slowly getting into the system, but they are not getting it done fast enough. So I think the major challenges is just those inflationary pressures, and the inflation that we had obviously in the previous 4 years was unprecedented, right? You have to be back from the 1970s, late 70s to have even seen that before. And so we're working that through the system. I think the Trump administration is doing an amazing job trying to transition the economy back to more of a manufacturing base. that will help stabilize a lot of economies in many of our states all over the country. And as that happens, people will have more dollars, they'll be able to make more money and be able to afford better things.
So then to conquer and approach these challenges, as we alluded to before, we have to have, that the federal government communicating with the state, like the Farmers Feeding Florida, down to the local, which we're talking about the food banks. There's so many chains that this goes through. How do you orchestrate? I feel like you're a conductor.
That is a very good analogy. So, when you think of all the hurricanes that have hit our state and ravaged our agriculture also, we don't always think of agriculture when a hurricane comes in because we see all the despair in our neighborhoods. But the reality is there's been, several $billion of damage to our farmers in those same hurricanes in the last 3 years. We were the first state in the country to get awarded a $575 million block grant to be able to help those farmers recover. Now, just as we were about to receive the money, the federal government shut down for an extended period of time. And so now that they're back open again, we hope within the next few weeks, we will be able to receive those resources and get those into farmers' hands. A lot of these farmers are small family farms. They needed these resources 2 years ago. Some did not survive because these resources come too late for them. But we're really hoping to get those resources to our farms. That is a big step of how the federal government steps in during disasters and economic, not an economic downturn, but in economic despair as you have hurricanes and other natural disasters. They can step in with grants to help farmers recover. We're hopeful that well before the end of the year, we will be distributing those dollars through my Department of Agriculture. That is the way that we work with our federal partners to get relief for farmers. In addition, as I mentioned earlier, the H-2A labor program, making sure that that program is accessible to our local farmers. Large farmers can have lawyers and teams of folks that can help work on these things. Small farmers do not. They're their own accountant, they're their own CPA, they're their own electrician, their own plumber. They do it all themselves. That was, what I did growing up. And we don't have time and we don't have the wherewithal to communicate with the federal government on labor programs. So we're working with the Trump administration and Brooke Rollins, and so we're hopeful to get those things to make them more simple for access for farmers. That's how the federal government can engage us. When you have an administration that is pro-agriculture and pro-business, you generally have a little more success. Unfortunately, the federal government is such a large bureaucracy, it takes years, in spite of them trying to do a better job.
So, Commissioner, we know a lot of the homes who are receiving assistance, they have kiddos, and we of course, we're going to feed the kiddos. What about the parents who may be struggling to keep them not just well-fed, but nourished in the right way?
Please go to the Department of Agriculture site. We're working on many programs. We have, I believe we have the access to our food banks and the network around this state. We started a new program called our Junior Chefs Program. You can see that, sign your children up to do that. Just for the record, my grandchildren are part of that program, but they're cooking with Chef Justin from the department. But yeah, there is plenty of information on our website about not only our junior chefs, but also about where you can go to receive food and the food banks and the distribution sites around the state.
And you can make that food go such a long way, especially when you have the collab with the kids and the parents, just make it an experience and a habit.
Right.
I love that. And finally, Commissioner, we have about a minute left here. As we approach Thanksgiving, I'm just curious about your final takeaway, maybe actionable items. What do you want folks to think about when the show wraps?
If you're thinking about it in terms of Thanksgiving, know that your Department of Agriculture is out here working every day to make sure your farmers are equipped not only with the knowledge, but maybe the tools they need to be being successful. But, we really just wish that everybody has a very blessed Thanksgiving and enjoy your family in this week. And make sure that you give them a little extra hug this time of year. We got Thanksgiving and we're following it up with Christmas. And so it's a great time of the year, and we would just like Florida families to be safe. Contact our office at any time. We've got a lot of resources within the Department of Agriculture to be helpful and a lot of information.
And what's your favorite, most rock star tradition that you have for Thanksgiving? What are you so stoked about?
As I was growing up, I had a granny. We had grannies when I was a kid. She made all the types of desserts. So at Thanksgiving in my household, not only do we have all the traditional, nourishment and food, but we also have all the cakes and pies.
Yes.
And so that pecan and pumpkin pie is going to go a long ways.
I love that. Well, it is an honor to have you here in our In Focus studio, and come back anytime. And thank you for your time, Commissioner. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. To keep up with important issues impacting our communities and hear more conversations with the people who are shaping the future, subscribe to our channel. You can also download our app or find Spectrum News on your TV for balanced, in-depth political coverage and more.